What's good, YouTube? Welcome back. Today it is the LazyDaze Channel, and we're back at it again with some more history reaction for you guys today. And we are doing some more Kings and Generals content for you, and it is their series, The First Crusade. In this episode, we have the Siege of Antioch, and it is part 11 in this series. I'm really enjoying this story and finding out more about this, and I am looking forward to finding out some more about the future crusades to come. If you guys haven't already, head over to Kings and Generals page. A link is going to be in the description box down below. If you're enjoying my content, like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell. But I am just going to jump straight into this one.
During the summer of 1097, the Seljuk scorched earth policy, coupled with the difficult terrain, stripped the Westerners from their most powerful tool, their heavy war mounts. Some fell from cliffs, and others perished from lack of water, forcing many knights to ride oxen, mules, or simply travel on foot, while goats, sheep, and dogs were used as pack animals. Soldiers were so dehydrated that on the rare occasion that water sources were found, many suffocated themselves as they drank too much. After arriving at Heraclea, the army divided into two. The bulk of the forces took the longer route north through Cappadocia and then east, circling the formidable Anti-Taurus, while a smaller contingent took the direct approach via the Cilician gates. This strategy resulted from careful and cunning planning on behalf of Alexios, who wanted to ensure a base of operations which could be used for supplies and later reinforcement, but also provides us with an idea of how well disciplined and coordinated the Council of Princes really was. The expedition in Cilicia was commanded by Baldwin of Boulogne and Tancred, the supporting side characters of their more renowned relatives Godfrey and Bohemond, who now had the opportunity to prove their worth. Tancred led no more than 200 men, but was accompanied by an Armenian guide, allowing him to arrive at Tarsus before Baldwin, who had between 300 and 500 troops.
That's barely
What
any.
used to be the capital of the region, and the place where Mark Antony first met Cleopatra, was now a meagre town, which lost its port to centuries of sedimentation.
A stone archway at Cleopatra still stands, commemorating Her Majesty's arrival, but this one. Oh wow.
On September 21st, 1097, the Seljuk garrison rushed out to meet Tancred in open battle, but they were easily beaten back. The Norman then taunted the enemy, claiming that he was merely the vanguard of a massive Christian force. The following morning, he received their surrender and raised his banner on the citadel. That same day, Baldwin arrived and feasted beneath the city walls alongside the Normans. Despite being absent from any engagements, he suggested that they were to share the spoils equally, and since he had the larger force, Tancred had to begrudgingly accept.
His
banner was replaced and thrown into a nearby marsh. Within hours, he gathered his troops and rode east. A month later, at dusk, a force of 300 southern Italian Normans arrived in order to reinforce Tancred, but were refused entry into Tarsus, forcing them to make camp under the walls. Unseen, the bulk of the Seljuk garrison slipped through the night and butchered them as they slept, before riding off into the distance. A rumor began circulating that Baldwin was actually responsible, and fearing for his life, he locked himself in a tower waiting for the storm to pass, before installing his own garrison and leaving a week later. But the bloody stain would never be forgotten.
No, it wouldn't be.
Meanwhile, Tancred had made it to Mamistra, where he was warmly...
Io, in here, enough. Get in here. Come.
welcomed by the local Armenians, who accepted him as their new ruler after the Seljuk garrison fled. Like clockwork, Baldwin arrived a few days later and camped near the city, but this time Tancred would not back down. The First Crusader confrontation was brief and more of a brawl than a battle. Some men were seriously injured, but no one was killed, and both sides made peace the next day before going on their separate ways. Tancred garrisoned Mamistra with 50 men, secured the port of Alexandretta, and met up with the main crusading host on its way to Antioch, after establishing friendly relations and a stable base in Armenian Cilicia. As for Baldwin, his adventure was just beginning.
Okay. Yeah, Baldwin goes
While
off
the rest
and
of
does
the
his own thing,
Crusaders
doesn't he?
prepared to head south, he was guided by an Armenian named Bagrat, who promised great riches and fertile lands to the east. Accompanied by just 100 knights, he took a page from Tancred's book, and was able to capture the towns of Tel Bashir and Ravindel with little more than a bluff. Initially, he rewarded Bagrat with lordship over the latter city, but before long a plot was uncovered, and Baldwin hunted him down and brutally tortured him. News of these conquests soon spread, reaching the ear of Thoros, the Armenian ruler of Edessa, who was barely holding on to power. The two men formed an alliance, formalized in a bizarre ritual, during which both men stripped to their waist and embraced each other under a long shirt, sealing a union between father and adopted son.
Okay, that is a really weird
With his
ritual.
newfound Latin son, Thoros dispatched Baldwin at the head of an Armenian force to deal with his Seljuk rival from Samosata. On his return to Edessa, the Crusader uncovered a plot by Edessene nobles aiming to assassinate Thoros. Baldwin neither aided nor turned them in, hoping to see where the wind blows, and in March 1098, the locals rebelled against their ruler and ripped him to pieces. Baldwin immediately jumped on the opportunity and established an iron grip over the city, which would become the base of the future County of Edessa, the first Crusader state, carved out with just 100 men and questionable morality.
Wow.
Meanwhile, the main body of the Crusader army took Marash on October 10th of 1097 and prepared to attack Antioch. At its peak, it was the third city of the Roman Empire, but its role in the region was now diminished due to the rise of neighboring Aleppo and Damascus. The Latins could have taken Jerusalem without it, but if they wanted to keep it, they needed this strategic target, which had immense value to all Christians. Luckily for them, those same cities were now fighting for dominance, while Antioch stood alone in the backdrop of the fragmented Seljuk Empire. Ruled by its ambitious and very capable Turkoman named Yankisian, who struggled to preserve his domain amidst civil war, pockets of Shiite Arabs, numerous Christian subjects, and now an impending zealous army with quite the reputation. But now, let's look at what he had going for him. A very capable Seljuk garrison of 5,000 men.
This was one of the most impressive like castles to me.
Alongside 800 soldiers, incredibly well-built walls, 20 meters high and 2 meters thick, covering a large area, including a hill featuring a formidable citadel 500 meters above the city, from which the defenders could track every Frankish move. There were foothills which could be turned into farmland, but above all, the geography made this city nearly impossible to take. The city was protected by a mountain to the east, while the Orontes River flowed in a way that if an army wanted to surround Antioch, it had to cross it, separating the camp in 3 on its west and south side. In mid-October, the leaders of the crusade gathered together to discuss how they would tackle this challenge. Tetichius came forward and proposed that they fortify themselves to the north and harass the garrison from afar, a long and drawn-out strategy that worked in 969 during the Byzantine Reconquista of the Macedonian dynasty period. But the majority decided on a more direct approach. Raymond of Toulouse was convinced that if the Crusaders took too long, many would desert during the winter, something which had already started to occur during the difficult trek in the mountains. Satellite fortresses were captured, with contingents securing Bagras, Arta, and the Iron Bridge, opening the road to the coveted city. But once the Crusaders met the imposing defences high above them, all hopes of a direct assault dissipated. 30,000 Latins, half of which were non-combatants, made camp against just 3 of the 6 main gates on the 20th of October, centred around the northwestern corner. Bohemond took up position in front of the St. Paul Gate, while the remaining Italian Normans, led by Tancred, camped behind. The northern French blockaded the Dog Gate, Godfrey of Bouillon held the Gate of the Duke, and the Byzantine contingent acted as reserves. siege warfare was a staple of medieval European warfare, which also came with certain traditions. Namely, the first banner to fly above the walls of a newly conquered city represented a strong claim to it, and it is here that we find that Bohemond was starting to show some of his ambition, being the first to arrive and positioning his forces against the most crucial gate of the three.
Try and get his banner up there first.
In the first 2 weeks, both sides were sizing each other up, which resulted in the calmest period, during which Yaghi sent out his sons to search for aid, and the Crusaders enjoyed plentiful supplies from the rich valley. Fearing mutiny, the Seljuks expelled a large portion of its Christian population, while many Armenians took the chance to visit the Crusader camp and report back to Yaghi what they saw. Suddenly, this army that took down the Sultanate of Rum didn't seem so threatening, and the strategy changed entirely. Arrows were shot from atop the citadel, while mounted archers sallied out and harassed the camp, racing back across the bridge when given chase. Harim, a nearby fortress, was still in Muslim hands and was used as a base from which raids were continuously launched. By mid-November, the winter cold was setting in, supplies were waning, and heavy rains poured on the Christian force. The Crusaders were putting barely any pressure on the city, while the city continued to receive rich caravans from the south. In order to turn the tide, the Latins built a bridge over the Orontes River by tying small boats together, which was difficult to cross. The maneuver allowed the Crusaders access to the sea via the crucial port of St. Simeon, which received regular shipments of supplies from Byzantine Cyprus. This entry point allowed the Franks to send and receive letters from the west, resulting in a rare collaboration between Bishop Adhemar and the exiled Patriarch of Jerusalem, who drafted a letter asking the West to send a new wave of reinforcements to the Holy Land. On the 17th of November, 13 Genoese ships even made it to the port, bringing vital craftsmen and materials, which were used to build a fort on the slopes of Mount Storin called Malregard. Next, Bohemond was chosen to deal with Harim, which he did by employing steppe tactics, namely a feigned retreat. This drew out the small garrison,
Bohemond really picking up those tactics from his enemies. That's a good trait.
Which was then smashed by a heavy cavalry charge, personally led by Bohemond. The fortress didn't fall, but its garrison was neutralized. According to eyewitness reports from the Crusader camp, those whom we captured were led before the city gate and were beheaded to grieve the Turks who were in the city. The garrison immediately responded in kind, according to the same report. Alas, how many Christians, Greeks, Syrians and Armenians who lived in the city were killed by the maddened Turks. With the Franks looking on, they threw outside the walls the heads of those killed with their catapults and slings. This especially grieved our people. The Greek Christian Patriarch of Antioch was regularly suspended from the walls upside down, while the guards beat his feet with iron rods. Both sides were determined to win, no matter the cost.
That's brutal. How is that going to work to, like, scare them? That's just going to make them want to do, come for you even more? You're antagonizing them.
With the coming of December, the shipments became infrequent, and hunger began to set in. Foraging parties ventured far from the camp, and many were picked off, never to be seen again. Merchants from Cilicia became one of the few lifelines for many, but greed and the dangers of making the journey led the traders to jack up their prices, which caused mass desertion amongst the poor. Those who could not afford to feed themselves were losing health, which led to the rapid spread of disease, causing the death of a fifth of the army. After celebrating a grim Christmas, Bohemond and Robert of Flanders left camp on a mission to find supplies, taking 400 knights and at least as many infantry with them east. The expedition did manage to find a significant amount of forage in the fertile area of Jabal as-Samak, raiding nearby villages. While camping near the town of Al-Bara, the group made one of the worst strategic mistakes one can make. They didn't post scouts, and suddenly realized that a 10,000 strong army was on the horizon. The combined force of Damascus and Homs, led by the formidable Atabeg Tugtegin, was equally surprised to find the raiding party on the 31st of December after they answered Antioch's call for aid. Robert instantly rallied his knights and charged against the overwhelming force, stopping the Muslim force. Bohemond stayed back, pouncing at the right moment as the enemy was trying to flank his ally. Rather than risk failure for themselves and the entire crusade, the men retreated back into camp, abandoning all of the supplies they had managed to gather, as well as those who were on foot. Such was the lack of war steeds that most of the cavalry chased after a single horse, who had lost his rider and galloped west.
Wow.
When the dust settled, the troops from Damascus regrouped and attacked the fleeing footmen, killing or capturing most of them.
Could you imagine like 10 of you running after the same horse because the rider is being killed? That'd be horrible.
The blow inflicted by the Crusader force was not fatal, but it did discourage the already disinterested Muslim troops from continuing their expedition, so they headed back to Damascus. Over the next few days, Robert returned to pick up a few stragglers and supplies, but overall, despite preventing utter disaster, the mission failed to resupply the camp.
Yeah, but it did. It may have like failed to resupply the camp, but it did stop that massive army from coming even close to the siege.
But Bohemond and Robert's absence didn't go unnoticed. The all-seeing Citadel reported the troop movement to Yaghi-Siyan, who ordered the garrison to sally out and attack the Crusader camp. To make matters worse, Robert of Normandy was absent, visiting a nearby port, and Godfrey was ill. Rushing out of the bridge gate, the Seljuks charged at the Provençal camp, where they met Raymond of Toulouse. After a quick engagement, the garrison force began to flee, as the southern French gave chase. Upon approaching the bridge gate, more enemies from both sides emerged, turning the attack into a rout.
Oh no.
Men snatched riders from their saddles and pulled at their horses' tails, killing 15 knights and 20 footmen. Amidst the chaos, the bannerman of Bishop Adhemar, the spiritual leader of the crusade selected by Pope Urban himself, was slain. The next day, the prize banner was flown atop the wall of Antioch, taunting the besiegers, who saw the flag depicting the Virgin Mary and felt like a legion who had lost its eagle. The turn of the year signaled the lowest point of the crusade. After crossing thousands of kilometers and enduring countless attacks and terrible weather, the Crusaders were nearing their breaking point. An eyewitness reports, "At that time, the famished ate the shoots of bean seeds growing in the fields, and many kinds of herbs unseasoned with salt, also thistles, which, being not well cooked because of the deficiency of firewood, pricked the tongues of those eating them. Also horses, asses, camels, dogs, and rats. The poorer ones even ate the skins of the beasts and the seeds of grain found in manure." Simultaneously, the men witnessed a comet.
Imagine being so hungry you're eating the skin of an animal which hasn't been cooked, or you're eating the grain which is in feces.
And Aurora
You'd have to be
felt an earthquake and
desperate
interpreted the
state.
signs as God's displeasure. It was at this crucial point when the clergy stepped up and decided to restore the faith by blaming it all on the sins of those involved. We believed that these misfortunes befell the Franks, and that they were not able for so long a time to take the city because of their sins. Not only dissipation, but also avarice or pride or rapaciousness corrupted them. Bishop Adhemar took measures into his own hands and began advocating that all women should be expelled from the camp, and the rest should fast for 3 days and form a procession around the city's walls. Theft and fornication were forbidden, and anyone who broke the rules was publicly punished. Around this time, a man and woman were caught in the act of adultery before being stripped and whipped for the whole army to see. These measures generally had a positive effect in restoring morale and discipline to the camp, but there were still some who deserted the cause, including none other than Peter the Hermit, who was caught trying to leave during the night. But by far the most impactful departure was that of Byzantine general Tatikius. Seeing the conditions reach an all-time low, the man who acted as quartermaster and representative of Alexios pledged to sail to Constantinople and come back with ships full of supplies. To make a strong statement, he even left all of his belongings in the camp. But for reasons which will become clear later, the shipments arrived, but the general did not. Writing with the benefit of hindsight, every Frankish chronicler will condemn both the emperor and his general, and many of their reports failed to mention these dozens of shipments, which allowed the siege to even reach this point. It was now late January of 1098, and Bohemond himself threatened to leave the campaign, stating that he lacked the funds to pay for his soldiers, which led to creating a common war chest, sponsored by Raymond, aimed at financing the purchase and maintenance of mounts.
Well, I was so confused why they were all saying Raymond. Literally, Raymond must be moneybags.
To ensure the army's cohesion, all Crusader leaders pledged to stay in the camp for 7 years, or until Antioch was taken. The garrison never stopped harassing the Crusaders, and during one of the many skirmishes, a glimmer of hope was born, as a high-ranking Seljuk nobleman was captured. After learning that his family commanded one of the towers, the Latins negotiated secret access to their tower as ransom, but Yakisayan uncovered the plot and relieved the family from their command. The Crusaders began torturing their high-profile prisoner, but to no avail.
Oh, okay.
Just when things couldn't get any worse, the first days of February brought the news that a new army was approaching Antioch.
Wait, I'm really confused. I thought they got access through the walls, so did they try and do it twice?
From the east. Ridwan of Aleppo gathered 12,000 men in order to lift the siege, and gave the council an impossible task. The answer was in the form of 700 knights, riding the last healthy steeds the Crusaders could muster, under the command of Bohemond. This was a big step, taken under desperation and based on his previous successes. With no infantry to slow him down, the Norman set out and hid his men behind a hill near the Iron Bridge, separating his force into 6 squadrons. From there, the Latins waited for the long column moving in from Aleppo.
Nice.
On the morning of February 9th, Ridwan was marching down the road with 2 detachments as a vanguard away from his main force. Bohemond could have easily held a defensive position at the bridge, but instead he sprung his ambush, ordering 5 of his squadrons to charge directly at the column, while he held back. One eyewitness described these first minutes of battle. The din of battle arose to heaven, for all were fighting at once, and the storm of missiles darkened the sky. Knowing that they were heavily outnumbered, these knights must have been terrified, but they played a crucial tactical role. Their shock attack drew Ridwan's main force forward into the heart of the battle. His massed troops now began to push the Crusaders back, and the Aleppans most likely felt that victory was at hand. In fact, this was the moment for which Bohemond had prepared.
And then he's going to come out with extra force,
The author of the Gesta Francorum, who was amongst Bohemond's troops, wrote an impassioned description of this attack. So Bohemond, protected on all sides by the sign of the cross, charged the Turkish forces like a lion which has been starving for 3 or 4 days, which comes roaring out of its cave thirsting for the blood of cattle. His attack was so fierce that the points of his banner were flying right over the heads of the Turks. The other troops, seeing Bohemond's banner carried ahead so honorably, stopped the retreat at once, and all our men in a body charged the Turks, who were amazed and took flight.
Just retaking control of the situation and retaking the moral
Our men
of the
pursued
situation.
them and massacred them right up to the Iron Bridge. The Norman bet the fate of the entire expedition on this brilliant move, and as the fleeing head of the enemy column started to trample those behind them, the knights who followed him recognized his genius. The garrison...
Bohemond is really making a name for himself in this series as well. More in Kings and Generals version than the other one. Kings and Generals go into a lot more detail.
Having seen Bohemond leave camp once again, attempted a counterattack, but once again they were repelled. With the battle and booty won, we carried the heads of the slain to camp and stuck them on posts as grim reminders of the plight of their Turkish allies and of future woes of the besieged.
psychological warfare as well.
Despite this success, the siege of Antioch was just starting, and in the next episode that we're planning to release very soon, we'll talk about how the siege progressed into the battle against Kaboka.
Well, I am definitely looking forward to the next episode. I like that the Siege of Antioch is over more than one episode. A lot of the other series have only sort of covered it in one episode, so it seems like there's a lot more involved than I used to know. So I'm definitely looking forward to finding out some more information about this. Like I said, I thought that they did bribe someone to get over the walls, but obviously it's not the person they had originally, or it could be used later on, but the first attempt hasn't gone well, so I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how they manage to do that. If you guys are enjoying my reaction to this series, then like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, but we will catch you in the next video.